Can a single decision from the pit wall ruin a perfect weekend? Oscar Piastri dominated absolutely everything, and yet he did not win. How do you explain that? Stick around because we're going to unravel one of McLaren's biggest strategic mistakes in recent history. Oscar Piastri arrived at the 2025 Qatar Grand Prix with a confidence that bordered on the supernatural. Since free practice, you could already see something different in him. Every lap he completed was millimeter perfect. His times were consistent, his pace unstoppable, and most importantly, his connection with the car was at its highest point since he debuted in Formula One. Not only did he lead Friday's qualifying, he also took over the sprint shootout, won the sprint race, and signed the pole position for Sunday. In short, it was their weekend. Lando Norris was not far behind. Although not as dominant as his teammate, his pace was competitive and positioned him as a luxury squire or contender should the race take an unexpected turn. McLaren had arrived in Qatar with the most balanced car on the grid, benefiting from a track that favored its aerodynamic efficiency, and from outstanding thermal management that allowed them to extend the stints without excessive degradation. The scenario could not be more favorable. Pirelli had imposed an unprecedented rule. No set of tires could exceed 20 to 25 laps, due to safety concerns following pre-GP analysis. This forced all teams to make at least 2 stops in the race. The direct consequence, the margin to improvise was reduced. Strategic decisions had to be surgical, calculated, precise. The golden opportunity came on lap 7. At that moment, Nico Hülkenberg and Pierre Gasly were involved in an accident that forced the safety car to exit. This event, in any other context, would have been just a parenthesis in the race. But in Qatar, it was a godsend for any strategist who was awake. Making a stop during the safety car saves approximately 26 seconds compared to doing so with a green flag. And since everyone was required to stop at least twice, this was the ideal time to execute the first one without compromising positions. The greats did not hesitate. Max Verstappen, from second position, was immediately called up by Red Bull. George Russell and Kimi Antonelli entered with Mercedes, Charles Leclerc with Ferrari. Even Alpine and Aston Martin took advantage of the opportunity. The pit lane was filled with activity, except in the McLaren pit. Piastri and Norris remained on the track, alone, as if nothing had happened, as if the wall wasn't seeing the same thing as the rest of the world. It was a surreal moment. What should have been a confirmation of McLaren's dominance became a scene of absolute astonishment for commentators, fans, and analysts. No one understood why the race leaders didn't execute a free stop. The networks exploded, the television graphics highlighted the error, and in the paddock, the faces were one of disbelief. McLaren, the same team that led the Constructors' World Championship after 3 rounds, had made a beginner's mistake. But the damage was not only strategic, it was psychological. From that moment, the entire team environment began to shake. The absolute control that Piastri had built over 72 hours began to erode. The rivals that had been neutralized on the track now returned with new tires and an abysmal strategic advantage. And the worst, McLaren was now in a dead-end trap, forced to make its 2 stops during active phases of the race, losing real time that the others had already saved. These are the kind of mistakes that change championships. Because it's not just about lost points, it's about the narrative of the team's morale. The message you send to your pilots when you don't support them with intelligent decisions. Qatar not only exposed a flaw in the strategy, it exposed a fracture in McLaren's ability to react to chaos. And in Formula One, surviving chaos is not an option. It is an obligation. The mistake was already made. The safety car stop had passed and the train of cars that did enter returned to the track with new tires, having lost just seconds. Meanwhile, Piastri and Norris were at the front, yes, but with a time bomb installed in their strategy. In a matter of laps, the entire grid that had stopped began to approach with a fresh pace. And that was when the drama moved to the McLaren team radios. That's where the real earthquake began. Lando Norris, always calculating but very direct when things don't add up, didn't wait to finish the lap to express his frustration. His radio message was clear, without embellishment. We should have entered after him, right? If we knew that the car in front was staying outside. What is surprising about this message is not only the content but the timing. In the middle of the race, under pressure, Norris had a tactical reading of the situation that was sharper than his own wall. He understood what was at stake and what had been lost. He didn't speak with anger. He spoke lucidly. The response of his career engineer, Will Joseph, was an attempt to justify the unjustifiable. He claimed that the rivals had lost all their flexibility for the rest of the race, a line that was not only cold, but demonstrated a worrying disconnect between the wall and what was actually happening on the track. Because in a race with rules imposed for safety that required 2 stops, strategic flexibility was, in reality, an illusory concept. Everyone knew they would have to stop again. But only McLaren held on to an idea that didn't exist. What followed was even more alarming. As rival drivers cut time, silence fell over the team. There were no immediate attempts at rectification, nor signs that the career plan was being rethought. McLaren was frozen. Not a quick stop on the next lap. Not an aggressive change in approach. Nothing. It was like watching a sandcastle crumble without anyone doing anything to stop it. On the other side of the garage, Oscar Piastri was experiencing the situation with a different kind of fury. If Norris reacted with words, Piastri did so with silences that said more than any sentence. When he crossed the finish line after having been overtaken by drivers that he had clearly surpassed hours before, he let out a phrase that will go down in history as a dagger for his engineer Tom Stallard: "No words. I have no words." It was a sentence, a diagnosis, a disappointment compressed into 2 sentences. Andrea Stella didn't take long to face the microphones. He knew the mistake had been so obvious that ignoring it was not an option. The McLaren team principal, usually calm and meticulous in their public interventions, appeared in the mixed zone with a serious face, their eyes lowered at times, and a speech that tried to balance between justification and acceptance of failure. But from the first minute, it was clear that the team had not anticipated that all teams would react to the safety car as they did. His sentence was direct: "We didn't expect everyone else to stop." It is at that point where the explanation begins to falter. In a category like Formula One, where teams have dozens of strategists, real-time simulations, and direct communication with tire suppliers, it is difficult to digest that McLaren would not have anticipated a massive reaction to the safety car. And even less so in a race where the strategic conditions were so defined before it began. The decision, as Stella explained, was made in real time, with the conviction that keeping the track clean was a greater advantage than joining the collective stoppage. But the key to the error, according to Stella himself, was not in the lack of data, but in a misinterpretation of the probable behavior of the rest of the platoon. That is to say, they bet on uncertainty and they made a mistake in their judgment. The critical point was the fear of executing a double stack, a consecutive double stop that, although possible, had significant logistical risks. McLaren occupies the first box in the pit lane, which means that any rival car that enters first passes right in front of its box. This, according to Stella, could lead to fatal delays if cars piled up. So they chose to keep Piastri and Norris on the track, hoping that some cars would also stay out. In sporting terms, the defeat hurt. Oscar Piastri, who had led the entire weekend with authority, was left without his first victory of the season, one that would have been the most convincing of his short but promising career. He had done everything right: impeccable qualifying, handling under pressure, dominant race pace. His car, the MCL39, had responded flawlessly. And yet, when the checkered flag came down, he was not at the top of the podium. He was not surpassed for speed. He didn't make mistakes. It was abandoned for a strategy that completely collapsed. Lando Norris, for his part, saw his position of strength in the championship erode. He was coming off a brilliant victory in Australia and a valuable podium in China. He arrived in Qatar with the real possibility of extending his lead. But the strategic error condemned him to a defensive career, far from his real potential. He not only lost positions, lost momentum. That momentum in Formula One can make the difference between leading the narrative of a season or getting caught up in the chase. And if one thing became clear after Qatar, it is that the battle for the title will not just be about cars and talent. It will be a war of decisions, reading situations, of reflections. In that area, McLaren seemed fragile. And that fragility, if not corrected, can be costly when maximum pressure scenarios arrive in the second half of the year. Leave your opinion in the comments what you think about all this.